Moved to my wife's hometown and uprooted my entire life just because she wanted to be closer to her family and friends. Today, she sits me down to inform me how this marriage isn't working because her high school best friends who just rekindled her friendship with claim that I'm not good enough for her within one meeting. I'm 34, male, and I've been married to my wife, 32, for 5 years, together for a total of 8. We met in Chicago where we both had our own thing going. She worked in marketing and I've been in software development. Life was good back then. We had a solid group of friends, stable careers, and a nice apartment. We were building what felt like a great life together and I couldn't have been happier. But about 7 months ago, things started shifting and I honestly didn't see it coming. Out of the blue, or at least it felt that way to me, my wife started talking more and more about her hometown in Minnesota. She grew up in a small, tight-knit community, and although we'd go back to visit her family a couple of times a year, it never really seemed like she wanted to move there. But suddenly, it was all she could talk about. At first it was small things like, I miss how simple life was back home. Or, it'd be nice to be closer to family now that my parents are getting older. Her parents are still in good health. But I get it, they're not getting any younger. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get nostalgic about where they grew up and I figured it was just a passing thought. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't just some fleeting whim. It was something she was really thinking about. Something that was starting to matter to her a lot, and honestly, I could tell how much it meant to her, so I started taking it more seriously. I love my wife and I want her to be happy. So I started thinking about how I could make this work for both of us. Her parents live in this small town and I've always been fine with them, but I've always loved the energy and vibrance of city life. That was a big part of why I love living in Chicago. There was always something going on, always new places to explore, and I loved the friendships I had built there. But in the end, we had a lot of deep conversations about it, and after a while, it became clear that this wasn't just about missing her hometown. It was about wanting to be closer to her family now that they're getting older. The more we talked, the more I understood where she was coming from. Even if it wasn't easy for me to picture leaving everything behind, I'd been hesitant about the idea at first, mainly because it felt like such a big shift. I loved our life in Chicago. My job in software development was going great. I have my friends and I was living in a city I'd always dreamed of. The thought of leaving all of that behind was honestly terrifying. But over time I could tell how much she needed this and I couldn't ignore that. Plus, the logistics of it were doable. My job offers hybrid work, so I only needed to be in the office a couple of times a month. That made the idea of relocating much more realistic. Still, I struggled with the idea of leaving Chicago, the city I had built my life, for a small town that felt like a completely different world. After months of discussing it back and forth, weighing the pros and cons, I eventually agreed to move. We packed up everything, our apartment, our lives, everything we built in the city, and we moved to her hometown in Minnesota. And that's when things really started to get complicated. At first, the move felt like a fresh start, but little did I know that it was going to shake things up in ways I couldn't have predicted. The move itself went smoothly, no major hiccups. We found a nice house just 10 minutes from her parents. It's smaller than our Chicago apartment but has a yard and more space overall. My wife was over the moon. She drove headfirst into reconnecting with her family and old friends, spending nearly every day with them. Meanwhile, I tried to settle in. I set up a home office, attempted to find my place in this new community. It wasn't easy. I felt like an outsider in a town where everyone seems to have known each other forever. But I told myself it was just an adjustment period and that things would get better with time. Last weekend, there was a local festival in town. A big deal around here. My wife was so excited because it meant she'd get to see some of her high school best friends. She hadn't seen them all together in years and you could tell she was really looking forward to it. When we got there, she introduced me to them. There were 3 of them and they were polite enough, but something about the interaction felt off. I can't explain it exactly, but their smiles didn't seem genuine and the whole vibe was weird. Maybe it's just me overthinking it, but I felt like an outsider even more than usual. Yesterday my wife sat me down for what she called a talk, and honestly I feel like my world just got turned upside down. She told me that her friends had opened her eyes about our marriage and I have no idea how we got here so quickly. These are people I've met once. Literally a quick introduction at a festival, and somehow in that short time they've decided I'm not good enough for her. According to them, she settled for me when she was living in the city and was scared of being alone. They also said that I don't fit into their tight-knit community and that I'm not the type of guy they always imagined her with. What really stings though is that instead of shutting them down or standing up for me, my wife told me she's been thinking about it and maybe they're right. Apparently their comments made her start reflecting on things she'd been ignoring in our relationship for who knows how long. She started listing issues that were never a problem before. I'm too focused on work, even though it's my job that's supporting us both while she's between jobs. I don't try hard enough to fit in with her friends. I've been here for 7 months and barely know anyone yet, and this one really hurts. We're just different people now after 8 years together. 8 years. It felt like a punch. She made it sound like she'd been quietly sitting on all these doubts just waiting for the right moment to unload them. The whole thing felt like I'd been blindsided. One minute we're building a life together in a new town, her hometown, at her request. And the next, she's questioning if we even belong together anymore. All because a few of her high school friends who barely know me planted these ideas in her head during one short interaction. It's so hard to wrap my head around it. Right now, I'm sitting in my home office, staring at my computer, completely stunned. I gave up so much to make this move. I left behind my friends, my support system, the life I'd spent years building in Chicago, all of it, just so she could be closer to her family, and now she's wondering if she even wants to be with me? I feel like I've been hit with a cruel joke. We've been together for 8 years and I thought we were solid. Sure, the move hasn't been easy. It's been lonely, awkward and tough being the outsider in the new town, but I thought we were in it together. I thought we were building something that was worth the sacrifice. What hurts the most is that I feel completely blindsided. How does someone go from being happy in a marriage to questioning everything just because a few old friends said a couple of things in one conversation? I keep replaying her words in my head, trying to figure out what went wrong. Is this really about her friends, or is there something deeper going on that I just missed? Did I not see this coming? I told her I needed some time to think, and honestly I really do. But right now I don't even know what to think. I feel like I'm drowning in confusion and I'm completely overwhelmed. Did I make a huge mistake by moving here? Was our marriage not as strong as I thought? And if she's this easily influenced by her friends, what does that say about us? About me? I honestly don't know what to do next. I've never been in a situation like this and I feel so lost. I could really use some outside perspective. Has anyone been through something like this? Am I overreacting for feeling so hurt and blindsided? And if you have any advice on what to do next, I would appreciate it, because right now, I feel like I'm in the middle of a nightmare that I can't wake up from. First off, I just want to say thank you for all the support and advice. Seriously, reading through your comments and messages made me feel less alone in all of this, and it helped me see things a bit more clearly. After taking some time to process everything, I decided to sit down with my wife last night for another conversation. I was hoping we could talk things out and maybe find some common ground. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way I'd hoped. I tried to approach it calmly. I told her how hurt I was that she'd let her friends influence her view of our marriage so quickly and easily. I said I felt blindsided and betrayed, especially after I gave up so much to move here and support her desire to be closer to her family. At first she just listened without saying much, but then she got defensive, and that's when she dropped more details about what her friends had been saying behind my back. This whole situation has escalated in ways I never thought possible, and now I'm sitting here trying to make sense of it all. Apparently, her friends have been pushing this idea that real Minnesota men are somehow better than me. They've painted this picture of the perfect small-town guy, outdoorsy, super social, involved in every community activity under the sun, hunting, fishing, coaching, little league, you name it. These are the traits they seem to think of the epitome of what a man should be, especially for someone like my wife, who's now back in her hometown. Then there's me. I'm a software developer who enjoys gaming, reading, and indoor rock climbing. Things that up until now she's always known about me and has been totally fine with. In fact, I remember her admiring me for having these hobbies, calling me a man who takes care of himself. She's always had her own interests too. I've never had an issue with that because we both know it's important to have a personal life and space apart from each other. We spent 8 years together, and I honestly thought we were on the same page about who we are as individuals and as a couple. But now, out of nowhere, I'm not good enough because I don't fit into this narrow, stereotypical mold her friends have decided is the right one for her. It's like everything I've been, everything I've done suddenly doesn't matter. All the things I thought she appreciated about me have somehow become flaws, all because they don't fit what some small town group of people thinks is acceptable. When I tried to remind her that she never had a problem with the things I enjoy, that she always accepted me for who I am, her response hit me like a slap in the face. She told me that moving back home made her realize what she's been missing, and then, as if that wasn't enough, she went as far as suggesting that maybe I should try changing my hobbies and interests so that I could fit in better with the people around here. That's when I completely lost it. I told her right then and there that I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not just to satisfy her friends or live up to their version of what a husband should be. It's one thing to be asked to compromise in a relationship, but it's another to be told to change who you are to fit into some mold that doesn't even align with who I've always been. That's not who I am. And I shouldn't have to change for anyone. Not for her, and certainly not for her friends. Naturally, that conversation didn't go anywhere productive. She said she needed space to think and decided to stay at her parents' house for a few days. I agreed to give her the space she's asking for, though, honestly, I don't know how to feel about it right now. Part of me is heartbroken that it's come to this. I thought we had something solid, something worth working through. But now it feels like everything is on the verge of falling apart. Another part of me is just furious. Furious that she's letting the opinions of people who barely know me dictate how she feels about me and our marriage. It's one thing to listen to your friends, but to let them steer your relationship this way, I can't wrap my head around it. I just don't understand how something so important, our relationship, could be swayed by a group of people who hardly know me and certainly don't have my best interests at heart. In the meantime, I've been doing my best to take care of myself. My family, especially my siblings, have been great about checking in on me. They've been a huge support, reminding me that there's still hope, that maybe this isn't the end. Without them, I'm not sure I'd be able to think straight. It's hard to keep my head above water when everything is just so overwhelming, but I'm trying. I've been spending time doing the things I enjoy, keeping my mind busy, staying as grounded as I can. I still hold on to the hope that she'll come around, that she'll realize what we built together is worth fighting for. But if I'm being totally honest with myself, my faith in our relationship is starting to waver. I don't want to have to change who I am to make someone else happy. I shouldn't have to prove my worth to her or her friends, especially after all these years together. At the end of the day, I have to be true to myself. Right now, I'm just taking things one day at a time. I'm trying to focus on myself and what I can control. If anyone out there has been through something similar or has advice on how to navigate all of this, I'm all ears. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this, and honestly, I'm struggling to make sense of it. How do you keep your faith in a relationship when it feels like it's being pulled apart by outside influences? How do you rebuild when the foundation starts crumbling? Any advice, perspective, words of encouragement would mean the world to me right now. I never imagined things would take such a dramatic turn so quickly, but here I am trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened over the past week. My wife's few days at her parents' house has stretched into over a week now, and it feels like every day just makes it worse. She's barely communicating with me. When she does, it's always through short, distant texts. We're not having any real conversation. No discussions about where we stand. No trying to work things through. It's like she's checked out emotionally and I'm left hanging. Meanwhile, her friends seem to be taking advantage of this distance. Apparently, they've been planning girls' nights and shockingly introducing her to single guys in their social circle. Yes, you read that right. She's still staying at her parents' house, but she's going out with her friends and meeting other men. I wouldn't have even known any of this if one of her cousins hadn't reached out to warn me. This cousin and I have always gotten along well, and she told me she felt like I deserved to know what was happening behind my back. According to her, this group of friends has a history of stirring up trouble in other people's marriages. It's like they see themselves as this exclusive small-town clique with very strict ideas about who fits in with their crowd. My wife's cousin even said they've done this before, convincing their married friends that their partners weren't good enough and encouraging them to move on to better matches. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, it's one thing to have opinions about someone's relationship, but actively try to tear it apart. That's a whole different level of messed up. As I sit here and think more about it, I realize these friends have probably been planting seeds of doubt in my wife's mind ever since we moved here. What really cuts deep is that she's letting them. This isn't the woman I thought I married. The woman I married was strong, independent, and loyal to her decisions. Now she's acting like she's being swayed by people who barely know me and don't even have our best interests at heart. It feels like I've lost the person I trusted the most, and it's honestly crushing. I can't keep waiting around hoping things will get better. I've scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney for next week. I never thought I'd have to take that step, but I need to protect myself if things keep spiraling. On top of that, I've started looking for apartments back in Chicago. My company has been a bright spot through all of this. They've offered me a full-time office position again. Whenever I'm ready to return, at least I have that to look forward to, even though it feels like everything else is falling apart. What's really eating at me is realizing just how fragile everything was. I gave up so much for her. I moved away from my friends, my city, my support system, all the things I loved about living in Chicago. I thought we were building something solid, something real, but now it feels like she's ready to throw it all away because our high school friends don't think I'm Minnesota enough. It's hard to wrap my mind around. The person I thought I could rely on seems to have changed so much. Well, maybe she was always like this and I just didn't see it. It's painful and it's hard not to feel like I was deceived. Right now I'm just trying to focus on what comes next. I'm leaning on my close friends and family for support. The thought of starting over is terrifying, but staying in this situation feels even worse. I'm heartbroken for sure, but I'm also angry, and that anger is what's motivating me to take action. I know I deserve better than this, better than being in a marriage where someone lets themselves be influenced by people who don't have our best interests at heart. For anyone who's been through something similar, I could really use some advice on how to deal with this emotional roller coaster. How do you pick up the pieces when everything you thought was solid falls apart so suddenly? How do you rebuild when you feel like you've lost everything? I'd appreciate any advice or words of encouragement, because right now I feel completely lost and alone in this. This has been the hardest thing I've ever had to face, and I'm just trying to figure out how to keep moving forward. Well, I guess this is going to be my final update. After meeting with the divorce attorney and taking some time to think, I realized it was time to take the next step and start putting myself first. I sent my wife an email formally outlining my intention to file for divorce. It wasn't easy to write, and hitting send felt like closing the door on a huge part of my life, but deep down I knew it was the right thing to do. What happened afterward completely threw me for a loop. She called me within hours of receiving the email, absolutely sobbing. Through the tears, she admitted that she had made a huge mistake. She told me how her friends had been manipulating her, planting doubts in her mind and making her feel like she wasn't living up to their standards by being married to me. They convinced her that because I didn't fit their small-town mold, she was settling for less. She admitted that she felt torn between their judgment and the life we had built together, and in the end, she chose wrong. Hearing her say all this hit me like a ton of bricks, and part of me wanted to believe her, to take her hand and try to fix things. After all, I still love her. How could I not after 8 years together? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we had crossed the line we couldn't come back from. The trust is gone. How do you rebuild a marriage when your partner was so quick to doubt you and let other people's opinions overshadow everything you've been through together? So I told her the truth. I said I appreciated her honesty and was glad she could see the damage her choices had caused, but my decision was final. I can't keep putting myself in a position where I have to fight for respect in my own marriage. She begged me to reconsider, crying even harder, but I stayed firm. I told her I needed to prioritize my own well-being and my future, and that meant moving forward without her. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but afterward I felt something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. Now I'm officially gearing up for my move back to Chicago. My old company has been beyond amazing. They're welcoming me back to my full-time position with open arms, and, honestly, that's been a lifesaver. It feels like a huge weight is off my shoulders knowing that I have a solid job waiting for me. Some of my former coworkers have even offered to help me find an apartment and get settled in, which is such a relief. Knowing I have that kind of support from people who genuinely care makes the whole process feel a little less overwhelming. I've got my work cut out for me, but at least I'm not doing it all alone. That said, it's also a bittersweet experience. Leaving here, this small town, feels like admitting defeat in a way. It feels like I'm leaving behind everything I try to make work, like all the effort I put in is just unraveling. But at the same time, it's also a chance for me to reclaim my life. When I take a step back and really think about it, I realize how many sacrifices I made just to be here. The friendships I left behind, the routines I used to love, the life I built for myself in Chicago, I gave up all of that to try and make her happy. And now here I am picking up the pieces and starting over. I can't lie, it stings. The woman I married isn't the person I thought she was, and that realization cuts deeper than I ever expected. Whether this side of her was always there or whether it started to show after moving back to her hometown, I'll probably never know for sure. But one thing I do know is that I deserve more than this. I deserve someone who respects me, who values me for who I am, not someone who lets other people's opinions and outdated views dictate how they feel about me. Right now, I'm focused on moving forward. I've started the process of packing up my things, figuring out all the logistics of the move, and slowly but surely saying goodbye to this chapter of my life. It's a lot to process. There are days when I'm still angry, still hurt, but at the same time, I can feel this strange sense of relief creeping in. It's like I'm finally able to breathe again. I didn't even realize how suffocated I've been for so long until now, when I'm starting to see a way out. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that love alone isn't enough to hold a marriage together. Sure, love is important, but trust, respect, and loyalty are just as crucial, maybe even more. Without those, love starts to feel like a hollow shell, no matter how deep it runs. And if you're being honest with yourself, you can't keep going in a relationship where you're being treated like you're not enough, no matter how much love there is. It's tough to admit, but it's the truth. To anyone who's reached out to offer advice and support throughout this process, thank you. You've reminded me that it's okay to stand up for myself, that I don't have to settle for a life where I'm being disrespected or undervalued. You've helped me regain some clarity when I was drowning in confusion and self-doubt. And to anyone else going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't let anyone, whether it's a partner, a friend, or family, make you feel like you have to change who you are to be good enough. If someone can be so easily convinced that you're not, maybe they're the ones who aren't good enough for you. It's not easy to realize, but it's a necessary lesson. Once you understand it, you can start building a better future for yourself. Starting over at 34 is terrifying. No doubt about it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared about what the future holds. But you know what's even scarier? Staying in a situation where I feel disrespected, undervalued, and constantly second-guessed. That kind of life isn't sustainable. So here's to new beginnings. Here's to finding people who love us for who we truly are, not who others want us to be. Here's to embracing the unknown and trusting that the right people and opportunities will come when we're ready for them. So, yeah, the divorce process is officially underway. I'm grateful it should be relatively straightforward since we don't have kids and most of our finances are separate. I've been working closely with my attorney to make sure everything is handled fairly and as quickly as possible. At this point, I'm just ready to close this chapter of my life, sign the papers and start rebuilding from scratch. I'm not in a rush, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting it over with. Interestingly, one of my most unexpected sources of support throughout all of this has been my wife's cousin. She's been really kind. It's been nice to have someone in the family who's been supportive of me. She even apologized for not warning me earlier about how toxic my wife's friends were. Apparently, this isn't the first time those women have meddled in someone's marriage.